We had a complaint with the town vice president, council, Paul Rogers. He's chewing on the mic. Not happy with him. Can we make that a note in the minutes?
Yes, sir. Meeting will come to order. This is a regular meeting of the Planning Board. First item on this evening's agenda are the approval of the minutes. First set of minutes comes from the regular meeting of June 12th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion? I have discussion. On item 5B, I'd like to modify the last sentence so that it reads, Mr. Croce requested that the town solicitor and planner investigate using the tree warden and draft revisions to the regulations as appropriate. Because the key aspect of that request was to see if the tree warden could be used to assist in that process. The fourth bullet on 5B. Fourth bullet on 5B. And on item 6A, I'd like the minutes to reflect the names of the people who were appointed to those committees. The Marijuana Committee is chaired by John Chumo, and Croce and Nash are members. And the Airport Zoning Committee is chaired by Joe Pyrrhic, and Fenton and Owen are members. So may I have modify the motion to accept the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes as amended. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Those minutes are approved. The next set of minutes are for the special meeting on June 5th. May I have a motion to approve these
So
minutes?
moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Third set of minutes are for the special site visit meeting on June 24th. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Those minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda is correspondence. There are 3 items of correspondence. The first is a letter of Stephen K. and Cynthia K. of 89 River Run dated June 8th, 2019 regarding Goldstein Prospect Avenue subdivision application.
Motion to receive.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to receive this correspondence. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That correspondence is received. The second is a letter of Paul and Janet Shea of 177 Prospect Avenue dated June 4th, 2019 regarding Goldstein Prospect Avenue subdivision application.
Motion to receive.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to receive this correspondence. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That correspondence is received. Third is an email from Kevin Kosinski dated July 8th, 2019 regarding the Brennan subdrain.
Motion to receive.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to receive this correspondence. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Correspondence is received. The next items is for continuances, but before we do that, I need to reschedule the next regular meeting of the Planning Board. It's scheduled for the 14th, and I will be away on the 14th as well as the 21st, and I'd like to poll the members to see if Monday, August 26th is workable for the next regular meeting of the planning board.
Works for me.
Works? Works?
Well, do we have a quorum for the regular meeting?
You mean on the 14th?
Yeah, I know you've got to be away, but would we have a quorum here?
I don't know. We can find out, but Ron asked me to poll to see if we could move this meeting to the 26th.
There's also an issue with one of the applicants not being available for the 14th.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
26th, okay?
Motion to,
26th, okay?
I'm going to be out of town.
You're out of town? BJ, you're okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay, so we have 6 on the 26th, so we do have a quorum.
motion to move the regular August meeting to August 26th at
Second
6
that.
PM.
Second that motion?
Motion's made and seconded to move the regular meeting of the planning board, the next one, from August 14th to August 26th. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the meeting is moved to the 26th. We now have continuances on today's agenda. For the benefit of the public, items 4A, 4B, and 4C, all of the old business items will be continued and therefore not discussed this evening. The first of these, item 4A, a public hearing, request of Brennan Realty LLC, Bernadette Realty LLC, and Mark Byrne Realty LLC for preliminary plan approval, including requests for waivers from certain provisions of the subdivision and land development regulations for a proposed 11-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Mitchell's Lane. The property is identified as 430 Mitchell's Lane, Assessors, Assessors Plat 124, lots 13, 14, 14A, 15, and is located approximately 1,300 feet to the north of the intersection of Mitchell's Lane and Fayal Lane. Is anyone here to speak on this?
Yes.
Mr. Martland.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd respectfully request that that matter be continued to the next regularly scheduled meeting of August 26th. It's my understanding that some revisions needed to be made relative to some of the septic designs that are being resubmitted to DEM, and therefore the matter isn't appropriate to move forward tonight.
Okay. The public hearing was left open. Do we have to do anything with that to move it to the
No,
26th?
you would just make the motion to continue it to that next regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is made and seconded to continue this item to the August 26th regular meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and the item is continued.
Thank you.
Second item is item 4B, public hearing, Prospect Avenue subdivision, Eugene Goldstein applicant. Request for combined preliminary and final plan approval for a proposed 8-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Prospect Avenue. The property is identified as Assessors Plat 121NW, Lot 66A, and is located approximately 0.3 miles to the east of the intersection of Prospect Avenue and Aquidneck Avenue.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd request that this matter be continued to the August meeting as well. We had submitted a report of a hydrologist since the last meeting. That report was referred to Stephen Cabral at Crossman Engineering for review. Mr. Cabral had some comments that our hydrologist needs to respond to, but he had been out of the country and unavailable to respond before today, so we would request that that be continued to
May I have a
August.
motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion is made and seconded to continue this item to the regular meeting on August 26th. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued to the August 26th meeting. The next item is item 4C, a public hearing. Application of Jack Gullison for development plan review, including requests for waivers from certain design standards of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, section 521, for construction of a new commercial building to include an 18-room hotel with a restaurant and associated site work located on property identified as 59 Aquidneck Avenue, Assessors Plat 115 SE, Lot 169. Is there anyone here on this?
I don't believe the applicant is here. I did receive communication from the applicant's attorney, Jay Lynch, requesting that the matter be continued. They're continuing to evaluate the plans and make potential revisions to the plans before presenting them to the planning board. So he's agreeable to the continuance to the August meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to continue this item to the regular meeting on August 26th. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I thought at the site visit that the applicant told us there would be 17 rooms by 18. Does anybody remember that?
Yes, yes, it is
Okay.
17.
All right.
So we should modify what's written there,
Well,
Ron.
they haven't formally changed the request.
They have not formally changed it, okay? So I guess they're in the process of making revisions anyway. All right, so the motion is made as it stands to continue this item to the August 26th meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued. The next item is item 5A, new business. This is a public informational meeting. The application of Morrison Farm LLC for master plan approval of a 6-lot major subdivision of land fronting on Morrison Avenue and Aquidneck Avenue. Assessors Plat 114, Lot 820, and located approximately 500 feet to the east of the intersection of Morrison Avenue and Aquidneck Avenue. Mr. Martin?
Do we need to open a public hearing?
No, I'll just we'll get a presentation from the applicant. Planning board can ask questions, and then it will be open for public comment. It's not a formal public hearing, but it is a public informational meeting, so the public will be allowed to speak.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. David Martland on behalf of Morrison Farm LLC. This evening with me, I've got Tony LaRusso, who's one of the principals with the applicant, as well as Josh Rosen, who's a professional engineer with the offices of Principi Engineering. Before the board this evening is a proposed 6-lot subdivision for property located on Morrison Avenue. The property is currently vacant and had been carved out and subdivided off of a larger parcel. I'm going to say it was in December. It was a 2-lot subdivision. My client acquired this property, and at the time, we had indicated to the board that there would be a subsequent proposed subdivision that would be coming forward, and this is that subdivision. What we've proposed is a 6-lot conventional subdivision, meaning that the lots themselves would meet essentially the R40 zoning requirement, 20,000 square foot lots. It also would be required to meet the frontage requirements in the applicable zone. As opposed to a conservation style subdivision. As you know, the zoning or the planning rules and regulations require that you propose a conservation style type subdivision as the first option, but there is some flexibility to allow you to file for a conventional type subdivision. And you can do that under certain circumstances, and the board would have to look at the plans and determine whether or not the conventional style subdivision is appropriate under the circumstances. And there are categories that are laid out that the board would need to find. And Ron and Rita laid this out in a memo to the board, but for purposes of, I think, the audience and any abutters, I think I would just read through, what is need to be found in any particular circumstance. So the board can consider the conventional plan if it makes one or more of the following findings. So, 1, employing conservation development for the subject property would not offer significant public and/or environmental benefits compared to the conventional plan. 2, compared to the conventional plan, employing conservation development for the subject property would cause a nuisance to the neighboring uses and would be detrimental to the appropriate use of neighboring properties. 3, compared to the conventional plan, employing conservation development for the subject property will not result in the protection of the unique natural features of the land, provide environmental benefits such as reduced stormwater runoff, or reduce infrastructure construction and maintenance costs. Or 4, the conservation plan would not create a neighborhood with direct visual and/or physical access to the protected open space. Tonight, we're relying on the first finding. 1, employing conservation development for the subject property would not offer significant public and/or environmental benefits compared to the conventional plan. And as we go through the explanation of the two plans, we'll lay that out a little further with Mr. Rosen. But essentially, under a conservation-style subdivision, you'd have 6 houses and lots all fronting on Morrison Avenue. And the open space parcel would be located to the rear. And under those circumstances, we don't think that there would be any significant, and that's a key word, significant public or environmental benefit from that type of situation. Instead, what's being proposed would be 4 lots fronting on Morrison Avenue and 2 lots fronting on essentially a paper road. And they would be located to the rear of the parcel. In connection with that, by proposing that road, we can show sufficient frontage so there are no variance requests being required. And then with that, we're asking for 2 waivers. 1, a waiver to construct the road, as has been done in some other situations, and 2, to reduce the proposed right-of-way width to 30 feet. So we're here tonight on really a master plan basis, which is, I always view it as a bit more, it's a conceptual type of approval. We're looking at the lines on the plan as opposed to, what's happening with the drainage and everything, because that's not done at this level. You don't get into stormwater runoff drainage until you reach the preliminary plan stage after the master plan. So this is simply the first step. It's the conceptual step. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to utilize the conventional style subdivision or the conservation style subdivision in this case? So with that, I'd like to call Josh Rosen to walk through the existing conditions on the site, as well as what's being proposed under both plans. If I could ask Josh to come up. And is this other microphone working? Does this work? Okay. So if you need to if you want to approach the screens at all, you need to bring this microphone with you.
Have him identify himself. Have him identify himself.
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Josh Rosen, Rhode Island registered professional engineer with Principi Engineering, offices at 27 Secundit Ridge Drive in Tiverton. If we could, I'd like to start with just a brief overview of the site conditions the way they are today. Can we flip to the second, let's say the third sheet in this set, please. I'll start with a brief overview of the site conditions the way they are today, and then just a quick explanation of a couple of components to both the conventional subdivision plan as presented in the plan set, as well as the brief layout we put together for the conservation development. Obviously, with the understanding that this is master plan, we're looking at moving forward with a particular concept and a density here at this point. So the site, as it's situated, is approximately 3.5 acres, just a little bit over, with frontage, small piece on Aquidneck Avenue to the west, and Morrison Avenue, obviously, to the east and to the south. A large portion of the area today, within the property limits, is existing pasture land. There's a couple accessory structures right now to the northerly property limits. The site's topography lends itself to a pretty much easterly draining site. The site right now drains from the west to the eastern and southeastern corner, more specifically, where both sections of Morrison Ave meet. So that overland flow from that neighborhood kind of gets directed to that intersection. There's public infrastructure in the way of stormwater controls in the intersection. Along the property frontage to the south on Morrison Avenue, there's an existing sewer main, and as well as up to the from south to north along the eastern property limits of Morrison Avenue, public sewers there as well. We've been told that the property, the way it sits right now, has some sewer laterals that have been installed previously when the original sewer mains went in. In fact, we're in the process of determining exactly where and how many, but the sewer department has indicated that there could be as many as 6 laterals that were left for this entire property for the potential of future lots at that point in time, back in the 70s. Public water ends at the intersection where Morrison Ave and Morrison Ave come together on the southeastern corner of the property, where there's a hydrant right across from this particular parcel. And as far as existing conditions, the only other point to note perhaps is that the area is, just like many others in this location, and a portion of the site's located within the community wellhead district. So if we could fast forward to, say, sheet 5, be great, please. The 5th sheet here represents what's been highlighted already, which is the conventional subdivision. 6 proposed lots, all conforming with an R20 zone, meaning the minimum 120 feet of frontage, 20,000 square foot of land area. Obviously, the frontage, as explained by the legal counsel here, is for lots in the rear of this subdivision toward the northerly property limits. That frontage is contingent upon a 30-foot wide right-of-way being designated from Morrison Ave into that property. The 4 other remaining lots out of the 6 will have frontage on existing Morrison Avenue. We kind of highlighted a couple of components to what would be a future site plan for each individual house lot in this scenario. The building footprints as shown, obviously, short driveway connections from Morrison Avenue for the 4 lots that front there, private individual wells for the properties, and again, the public sewer lateral connections for each of the 6 lots, as well as disconnecting from what's anticipated on the stormwater end of things, although nothing's been designed for sure, anticipating disconnecting that roof runoff into perhaps underground systems adjacent to the house structures. So one of the important notes here with the conventional subdivision, it's our feeling that obviously this allows us to lay out a plan at this master plan stage that's more sort of in harmony with the neighborhood in terms of how the lots lay out and where the buildings would be positioned. We have obviously 2 lots that we're able to share a driveway, which is always good. And to set those lots in the rear of the parcel takes them off of the frontage of Morrison Ave and sort of makes a little bit more widespread development. And like I said, matches this neighborhood a little bit better than what you'll see if we were to go to the conservation development. With that said, the last sheet in this set was a conceptual layout for the conservation development, and that is the 6th sheet. And again, this, although obviously the number of lots here are equitable to the conventional plan, we have 6. This creates a little bit more of a dense corridor along Morrison Ave at both locations, because now we have the direct frontage for those house lots, you know, right on top of Morrison Avenue. Whereas before, like I said, there were 4 house lots that would have that direct frontage, so to speak. The lots are smaller than the rest in the zone. I mean, the abutting zones here are R20, obviously, and then R40 to the east. So these lots, you know, with that conservation element, range from anywhere from 10,000 square feet up to 15,000 square feet. So a little bit smaller feel, probably a little more dense feel along the corridor. And although we do have the open space in the rear, we sort of felt that, you know, in this scenario, unlike some other instances, that there's really no benefit environmentally or from the standpoint of infrastructure if we were to develop this plan going forward, so.
And Josh, under the existing conditions, are there any environmentally sensitive areas that are located in the rear where that open space would be located?
No, there's certainly, again, on this parcel, there's nothing that we would normally highlight or indicate as an area that would either have special species, any other aquatic sites or anything like that we would be preserving by providing this open space into conservation the way it's shown here.
One of the things I failed to indicate to the board previously is that the plan has also been submitted and reviewed by the Technical Review Committee. They looked at it together with the fire department. They recommended positive recommendation with respect to the conventional style subdivision, and had listed a number of conditions, recommended conditions of approval that are included in the memo from Mr. Wolanski dated June 20th. There were 6 conditions in there. And if I just might go through those conditions and address those. One of the conditions was documentation regarding the capacity of the public sewer system to accommodate the proposed development. An authorization to tie into the system must be provided as part of the preliminary plan submission, which the applicant certainly agrees to and is part of that preliminary plan type of submission. Second condition of approval was that new lots would be subject to the town's development impact fees, and we should include a note on the plans. Plans will be revised accordingly should we get approval of the proposal at the preliminary plan stage. 3, stormwater runoff and sump pump runoff should be routed and tied directly into the town's storm system in Morrison Avenue, said design to be provided at the preliminary plan stage. That item was brought up by Mr. O'Loughlin with Public Works, indicating he didn't want to see a situation in which that potentially some pumps were discharging water from houses directly onto the property or onto Morrison Avenue, because it could create an issue with freezing in the winter. It could create a hazardous condition, and if there were to be any of those mechanisms utilized, that they would have to be tied into the drainage system, and we would have no problem with that particular condition. 4, a note shall be added to the plan stating that the owners of the proposed lots 5 and 6 shall be responsible for the maintenance of the proposed shared driveway unless and until a public street is constructed and accepted for town maintenance. If we could just go to the conventional subdivision. layout. And if I could just approach, what we're talking about there in that condition is there's this proposed right-of-way, and there's a request for a waiver to construct the road to town standards, and rather in that would be a driveway to service the two properties in the rear. However, because that property is being dedicated to potential future public road usage, and that's, then in the meantime, until that happens, those two property owners would be responsible for the maintenance of that entire area. The town wouldn't be responsible for that. And this also ties in with item 5, a defeasible easement extending to the abutting property line shall be provided at the end of the proposed right-of-way. You can approach here. What we're talking about is a 50-foot wide, or a 30-foot wide in this case, area at the end of this cul-de-sac, so that in the event the property in the rear were ever to be developed, they would have the option to have a connection through the proposed right-of-way to Morrison Avenue, and would have
Mr.
to
Martler, for the
construct.
benefit of everyone, can you define what a defeasible easement is?
The defeasible easement would allow, it's an easement granted to the town that at some point the town could exercise rights so that that area could be utilized for a public roadway. And so that road could be extended into the property to the north. And that's being done because the regulations require that you allow the projection to abutting properties if you're proposing any type of right-of-way. And so that's why that would be done here. Item 6, the proposed shared driveway shall have a driving surface with a minimum 14-foot width and sufficient turning radii at the intersection with Morrison Avenue, subject to the approval of the fire department, to be reviewed at the preliminary plan stage. This was an issue raised by the fire chief, deputy fire chief, during the TRC process to provide for a wider radius on the entrance from Morrison Avenue into that driveway, and they wanted to be assured that it was sufficient to handle an engine going down and having the ability to turn around at the end. So all of those conditions were proposed by the TRC, and all of those conditions are acceptable to the applicant. But, they're not necessarily reflected in the plans that were submitted. Those are some changes that have been made or suggested through the process, and are conditions of approval. So that is sort of in a nutshell what's being proposed here. And we're here to answer any questions that the board might have. I understand that members of the public.
Do you have anyone else to testify?
No, I don't think I've got any.
Questions from the board?
I've got a couple of comments. This is kind of a unique application. This is the first time this board has looked at the relative merits of a conventional subdivision versus a conservation subdivision. And I'm really pleased to see the TRC weighed in to help us make our decision. The other thing in this application I find unfortunate is that water is available. However, due to the regulations of the water department in Newport, the water line has to go down the middle of the road. It can't be put in the lateral. And as I think we asked or discussed at the site visit, that's a huge expense for the applicant to do that. And I just find that doesn't make much sense to me, but those are the regulations that currently exist.
BJ?
Yes, my comment is, goes along with what Art just said. investigate more fully tying into the Newport water supply, if that is what is going to be happening. I know, as Art said, it is very expensive, but it seems sort of common sense. And from what I know of the area, I think that it might behoove the applicant to put a better water supply than seems to be in the area. I don't know.
Bill? Sure. Thanks, Dave, for presenting. Question, in a conventional, the frontage in zoning is 120, right, Ron?
Yes.
120. So just for clarification, on page 5, it looks like there's a lot of overlays going on. Looks like you show 80. It looks like you took that from the conservation. But I do note on the proposed conventional, it shows 120, but I know you need to clean up a little bit, but I wanted to make that note. Secondly, so I do support the concept of a conventional, but I just wanted to make note that it does make for some tight lots. The lot fronting around the corner on Morrison, the two there. Now, I'll just make a note that lot A2 on page 4 shows a deck that encroaches on zoning. I know that you're not proposing that now, but somebody that might consider purchasing that would likely need a variance. But you do show it, so I wanted to make note of it, and again, that's not a deal breaker for me. And the same goes for on lot 5, lot A5, you show a deck also within the setback, so.
Bill, those aren't decks, that's stormwater.
Oh, I apologize, but, okay, thank you for the clarification.
I do understand your point, though.
But it does
Mr.
make
Nash.
this tight, at least on lot 2, A2. But again, it can be done. That being said, so I guess my only other question is, the defeasible easement, I was at the TRC, and I get, 2 questions on that. One, why is there a little stub there at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 20-foot piece or 10-foot piece, whatever it is? Is that standard practice, we did talk at TRC about moving that up to the property line, but I guess, did that go anywhere, or is that?
I think from a practical standpoint, it doesn't make much difference. The defeasible easement will provide for the future connection,
Okay,
so that the end of the cul-de-sac doesn't actually have to touch that property line. I think that's what you're saying. Why doesn't it go right to the property line?
right,
I think that the defeasible easement will accomplish.
sure. Yeah, is there a reason why you designed it that way, Josh?
It just makes it cleaner.
Josh.
Use the mic, please.
There's really no particular reason. It makes a cleaner endpoint so that you actually have a defined line segment.
Sure, it's tough to find a point on
Perpendicular.
paper, yeah,
Rather than the radius that just intersects at that point.
understood.
If it's extended, you still need a width of 30 feet there, because it's only gonna
Sure.
contact the property line at that specific point. So, you know,
Understood.
either way.
I agree with that. I guess then my question is, you mentioned a 30-foot defeasible easement where the right-of-way is 50. If the property adjacent to that is to be developed, we would likely be looking at a 30-foot right-of-way coming out of there. I guess, is it going to be 30? Is it going to be 50? 50 is the standard, correct?
Correct.
So I guess that's a question I would have. Should it be 50? And if it is, that may limit potential development on other lots. Not that I care about that tonight, but
Yeah, I could certainly speak to that. I mean, 30 is being proposed because 50, is that 20 feet, and then you start cutting into or shifting the lots further to the east. and the geometry in those lots gets rather compromised.
Sure, I understand that.
And-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
And so in order to propose a conventional style subdivision as opposed to going with the conservation style subdivision, this is, you know, we're sort of at the limits with what we can do with the
Sure.
the right-of-way. Now, the board's got, in its regulations, the authority to allow rights-of-way less than 50 feet. It's certainly permitted. You can go to,
Sure, and I support, I don't, I support reducing it in this particular case. I guess for future reference, and there is a fair amount of land to the north of that, just for the board's knowledge, if we see that come forward in the future, or if the town does, we'll be looking at going from, you know, maybe a waiver there as well. But that's not something we can predict, but I just wanted to be clear. We should define it as 30. It's not spelled out in the, it's not spelled out in the condition, I don't think, to 30 feet, but we should probably do that just to be safe. But other than that, I support the convention.
Mike?
Thank you.
Okay, the geometry of the lots kind of restricts the outer perimeter of the houses. You know, I see some houses are 40 by 80, and some are 30 by 50, and some are 28 by 36.
yeah, so the engineer tried to put on some basic footprints to say this is what could potentially be built on these particular lots. So yeah, particularly with respect to lots A2 and A3, you end up with certainly smaller footprints for houses as a result of the geometry of those lots.
One other question, you know, the those grid items, you know, behind the homes, they're what are they again? They're stormwater catch basins or something? Are they?
If, Josh, you want to clarify what those were proposed to be?
So the rectangular footprints would be for those house boxes, the way they're shown. Again, those are conceptual sizes just to show potential future development as far as the residential structures, but that would be some type of underground stormwater system just for the roof runoff from those houses. We just kind of showed it just to predict possibly considering those moving forward, and also to show that there's adequate space on the lots to, you know, to have an area assigned to handle the stormwater coming off those roofs. So that's, those would be some kind of underground chambers, or it could end up being rain gardens, but generally that would be the footprint size to accommodate those roofs.
Now, one of the conditions, I guess, that was brought up in this TRC said that all these stormwater systems will be tied together into the stormwater system that's on Morrison Avenue.
And that's a good point to bring up as far as clarification goes. I think the comment that was made had to do with sump pumps. These wouldn't be systems to accommodate sump pump water. The sump pumps, from what I understand, were alluded to in the case that the basements have an elevation that's within that particular groundwater in the area. We would obviously do what we can during the preliminary phase to design the house lots in order to stay out of the groundwater table, and hopefully the sump pumps would not be required. Whether it be, you know, grading wise or a different type of construction for the house lots, we would investigate that at the preliminary stage. There's a couple of different ways to go about that, but I think the comment was about sump pumps being tied together, those are underground systems, you know, for groundwater, whereas the systems here are for the actual roof runoff generated from the new houses.
Yeah, and we generally realize that, you know, throughout the area, there are high groundwaters that are prevalent, certainly during the wet season in particular, and that's why Public Works raised this issue to to say, you know, if you've got a basement, you know, there's a high likelihood that you may have some water. And if you're gonna be proposing a sub pump, we wanna make sure it's not discharging, you know, in the middle of winter or out onto the streets. We want that tied into the stormwater management system that the town has in Morrison. And so, that's the note that was reflected.
Okay, but that'll show up eventually on these plans?
Yes, so there has been little to no, you know, engineering done,
Yeah.
because we are at, you know, really a conceptual stage. And it's really to get the sense, all right, are we doing the conventional style subdivision, or are we going down the route of conservation style subdivision? And once we have that nailed down, then then that's when all of the real engineering would occur, you know, in advance of a preliminary plan submittal. BJ?
I was just wondering whether or not, if, just looking at the plans, if there was some way to make lots A1, A2, maybe condense that frontage into fewer lots than the 6. And just to see whether or not you might get a better view of how it's going to look. The second thing is, has anyone in all these areas ever thought of putting in French drains, which will eliminate the use of, we're talking about sump pumps and things like that. Now, the reason I know that is because where I live, there's a lot of water. All my neighbors have flooding in their basements. I don't, because my mother, in 1945, put in a French drain, and I don't have any water at all. So that's just a suggestion for thought as to these poor people with wet basements.
Bill?
Yeah, follow-up. So, did you, I know you haven't done any engineering, but I would expect to hear some comments from the abutters on the wells. Do you care to address that now, or at least maybe a cursory comment on where you're going with that? Because I anticipate hearing about the wells.
Well, with respect to the wells, we haven't really addressed that particular issue. That's what's being proposed. We've got a right to propose them, but, you know, at a preliminary plan stage, we would be retaining a hydrologist to conduct a review of the area, the watershed there, and the capacity of the aquifer, and would be able to present that evidence at that point. I mean, I am not.
And just to be clear, if obviously if the engineering doesn't support wells in accordance with the standards that are in place, then we might be looking at some other options.
We might be looking at an extension of the
Correct.
water line.
So that's just for the benefit of what we may start hearing.
Other comments? I have some comments. I would like to reinforce the comments of Mr. Nash on Lot A2, the tightness of it. I don't know, I know this is the conceptual stage, but the way you've drawn it, the house doesn't even fit inside the dash lines, the setback distances. Now, that may just be... Is that better? Sorry. What I was saying is, in Lot A2, at least on the drawing I have, the house is overlapping the setback distances, so you have to take a look at that much more carefully when you come to your actual design, okay? Also, on the north boundary, this property where you're getting the defeasible easement, what's up there now?
Well, there are two properties there now. I think one of them fronts on Aquidneck Avenue.
But
I think there's
they're
a
not
mixed
developed
use.
at all, or? there's
One
nothing?
is and one is, I believe the property of Mr. Farrier may be developed, but property sort of to the east of that, I believe, is a vacant lot. But without looking at the map, it's difficult for me to,
So getting this defeasible easement, I assume you were going to center it at the top of the cul-de-sac. Do you know that that's workable now? If you don't know what's going to be in the property to the north?
well, where, the TRC suggested that the cul-de-sac project to the abutting property.
It's a town requirement, it's a town policy and requirement that cul-de-sacs, dead-end streets be extended to the property line and allow for extension into the abutting property if possible, and if it's a possibility that that property could be developed in the future. So
Okay.
that's what they're providing.
So my next question is, can your design accommodate the 50-foot easement? I know you're
don't know.
requesting a waiver for 30, but can it accommodate the 50-foot easement?
Can somebody show A2?
Please, please, please.
That wouldn't hurt the lots. There's enough area.
A2 is the,
Yeah, but it would,
for the benefit of the audience, could you show what lot is A2 on the diagram? Dave,
yeah,
can you show what lot is A2 for the benefit of the audience? There it is right there, okay? So the
are you
question- I
saying
mean,
50 feet to the,
Presumably, if we pass this with the 30-foot request this evening, then that's a given, is that correct?
It's not a given if you require that the defeasible easement be at 50 feet wide. The issue would be that you'd have a 30-foot right-of-way meeting a 50-foot defeasible easement.
But what happens if the adjacent property is developed? Are they going to have the 30-foot right-of-way throughout that whole development because of that?
No.
Not necessarily.
No.
So, I mean, well, anyway, that's, I don't know why you wouldn't request a 50-foot easement if you could, especially since there could be a 50-foot access coming from the other direction.
It wouldn't matter. The defeasible easement, that short section, whether it's 30 or 50, the only thing that's going to matter in the future is what's being assigned for the actual roadway. And so that roadway width within the right-of-way, as you know, would be really of importance. And whether it's 30 or 50, the road ends up being 22, 24 feet, whatever width that is, and that's the area that we'd be most concerned about going forward. Can
The,
it handle that
yeah.
width?
I understand. The proposed right-of-way, is that planned to be paved?
the surface was going to be subject to the approval of the fire department to be reviewed at the preliminary plan stage.
And I guess I would like to encourage you to consider tying into public water, even encouraging you to negotiate with the town about the cost, because it's beneficial to them as well. So I don't have any other questions.
I agree about the public water. Yes, as does,
Joe, you have a comment? I'm sorry, Joe.
No, my comment reflects, Paul, yours and BJ's. If we have water very proximate to the property, I think it would be beneficial to have that be maybe a condition of any master plan approval.
Does, if they show the master plan with wells and we approve the master plan, are we then committed to wells, or can they still go with public water?
I think if the board would like them to seriously consider public water versus wells, I would make that a condition of the master plan approval.
Could you please indicate that as a condition then?
If the board,
I would like
if the
them to
board wishes, yes.
seriously consider that. But like I say, I encourage you to negotiate with the town. Any other comments from board members? No. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment? Please, come up and identify yourself.
My name is William Nealon. I live at 163 Morrison Avenue. I'm the big piece in...
Before you start, you have 5 minutes and...
Okay. I'm the big piece of property in the corner that is bordered on two sides of that property. I can attest to a few things. When it rains, I have duck pond in my backyard. The runoff from west downhill is considerable. I believe the engineer mentioned something about dry wells. I put 3 dry wells on my property. They don't do anything. That type of soil, they fill up like a bathtub and they stay full for weeks. Also, in putting these dry wells, I discovered from this property that's proposed development, 4 different pipes underground, about 2.5 feet underground, bringing water into my property. I understand that my parcel was originally one big piece of property, and for some reason they were putting water down there to, I don't know, make a pond to feed for the cows to drink or something, I don't know. There are 4 pipes underground feeding into my lot. I just am very concerned about runoff and water in that area. It's a very big problem.
I encourage you to discuss this with the engineers at this time, and maybe they can address, when they're looking at the drainage for this development, they can perhaps address some of the
Yes.
issues you have.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please.
Hi, my name is Donna Leatham. I live on 140 Morrison Avenue. And I want to attest too, because it's so dangerous, with the drainage, when they did put in those new drainage, when they were putting in the new roads, when it rains, well, it's mostly going to rain so far, the corner with A2, that's why I was questioning A2, there is so much water there, you can't pass a car there. We had ducks in the road. That's how much water. The drainage, for some reason, is not adequate for that area. If we were putting more drainage into that, I'd like to see what's going to happen, because everything centers around that corner between Compton View and Morrison Avenue, right in that corner. That's where all the water puddles there, but it's very deep and it's very dangerous. I'd like to know how you're going to
Well,
address
the
that.
engineering comes in the next phase, but they should heed your comments at this
Yeah,
point.
that was just, I mean, it's a major concern there, because I've called the town many a times to say, could you come and try to unplug these? Because we have so much water, you can't pass there, you can't go around the corner to get to my property down there.
You know, I think these are excellent points that certainly need to be investigated as this moves along, and I would certainly encourage my client and engineer that, you know, in a large rain event, to go out and sort of firsthand witness what's occurring, so that, you know, we can ascertain, you know, what issues might be able to be resolved.
That would be good. Anyone else from the public who would like to speak?
We know you.
M. Teresa Santos, 214 Morrison Avenue. Members of the Planning Board, Assistant Solicitor, Mr. Motlin, I have my paperwork from the Ethics Commission, so I am allowed to speak today. Okay? First of all, there is an error on the drawings on this thing that does not show a driveway at 212 Morrison Avenue, which is almost across from the so-called 30-foot wide proposed road that they want to put for this plan. Number 2, once land is gone, it's gone. Number 3, everyone in the area on Morrison Avenue on my side, I've been living there since 1953. I had good water. Started building. I don't have good water anymore. I know of a neighbor who was going to bring up water from the corner. It was a costly amount of money that it was going to be to him to bring up water, city water, up to his property on Morrison Avenue. So it's going to be expensive. My other question is, and I know there are folks here that abut the property on the road adjacent to this lot 820 that goes out to Morrison Avenue. Is the developer going to pave that section of the road going onto Aquidneck Avenue from lot 820? Number 3, 4, whatever. That was farmland many years ago. Cows, sheep, everything. This present owner hasn't even picked up the bales of hay that have been over a year in that lot. Second, he hasn't even cut the hay. Everybody in our neighborhood takes pride in their property, has their lawns cut, but this fields and the field on Aquidneck Avenue, which he is proposing to build a house on too, has not been mowed. That's not a good neighborly thing to do. The hay bales are still there. They've been there almost 2 years, if not longer. They're still there. The hay hasn't been cut. That's not a good neighbor. That's not starting off on the right foot. Thank you, gentlemen
Thank you.
and ladies.
Anyone else who wishes to comment?
Good evening. My name's Ron Kosgarten. I'm at 192 Morrison Avenue. Everything that's going on, I appreciate everybody, what they're saying. Has everybody taken into consideration the amount of traffic on Morrison Avenue? Which, if any of you have driven down that road, you can't get 2 cars by in the first place. Where is all this added traffic coming from? Or how are they gonna, accommodate it is my point. We have, just recently with the construction at 7-Eleven at Aquidneck Avenue and Green End, so many different cars coming down our road. You're being run off your road trying to get out of your own street. So it's just a major concern to us that this added traffic could be also an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, please.
My name is Stephen Faria. I live at 585 Aquidneck Avenue, or the property to the north of that property. And you were asking what's on that property. I have a house with a pool. There's also a pond on there. I worry about kids encroaching because there's a garage there now, and they store stuff. And there were some kids the other day running on my property. The pool is secure, but my pond is not. I worry about kids coming into my property. The other thing I worry about is when they started developing Morrison Avenue and they put the houses in, my well, which was fine, I started to run low on pressure. I now had to go down deeper with my well. I want to know what guarantee that I'm going to get if he puts wells in. If my well goes dry, what is the town going to do about it? Not only for me, you got Clarence Rigo, you got Garrett, you got Mr. Santos, you got everybody in the neighborhood. So what guarantee are we going to have? Otherwise, we're going to be spending our money for wells, deeper wells, taxpayers. I've been there for 54 years, and we're going to be paying money to get deeper wells. Now, this guy makes a ton of money selling house lots, and he's going to walk away with money, and it's going to cost us money. So I'd like to know, what guarantee do we have that my well won't go dry? And the property up there is very, very wet, and I had to put French drains in also. And I also worry about Mr. Rouse's property, about some stuff that he had an old well there, an old hand-dug well, and he filled it in. And I think he might want to check what's in that well before they develop part of that property. I'm not sure, but I would be cautious about it. But anyway, I'd like to know what guarantee do we have as taxpayers and abutting property owners if our wells run dry?
There is no guarantee.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a question to the board, I'd defer to the planner and the solicitor. I
Yes,
don't,
let the-
at this point, know what, there's no guarantees, but, I mean, I want to say that in a better way and give them a better answer.
Well, I mean, let me ask you a question. If you people all had houses and then somebody put a house in and tapped a well, now your well went dry and then you had to get somebody to get in there to get your well deeper or get it, how would you feel? I mean,
That's a different question.
It's a very touchy situation.
Completely different question.
I mean, it's a scary scenario because you run over to the tap and you open up your tap and out comes water. You run up to your tap and open it up and nothing comes out, which happened to me. That's kind of crummy.
Well,
Let me comment. The board is aware that there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty about wells and well water. It happens almost every application that comes up.
Yep.
So, I'll make two comments, okay? One, that's why we're asking the applicant to give serious consideration to hooking up to public water, number one. And number two, the town is conducting a study to look at full build-out and what impact it would have. Hopefully that will answer some questions, but in the meantime, at least with this application, we are encouraging them to hook up to public water.
Okay. And one other thing is it possible to request for him, if he does get this approved, to put up a fence through the property line to protect my property from kids encroaching on that?
Well, I think you should talk with the applicant and
Okay.
let them put in your request and let them know why, and they should consider it.
I'm certainly happy to address that. We're happy to construct a fence along that property line.
Okay,
And also
that's fine, that's
to
fine.
address the concerns with the wells, concerns of the board.
Dave, come speak to the
Yes.
mic if you want.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To address the concerns of the board and the residents, taxpayers regarding, their wells, we are seriously going to look at extending that water line
Good.
for this subdivision. And I think in all likelihood, that's what will be proposed at the next level.
Good.
So that we don't have, this sort of lingering issues and concern on the wells and impact in the neighborhood.
Okay, any other?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people?
Paul, I'm concerned whether or not the abutters who have, sounds like some ongoing well issues, would have the ability to also tap in if there was an extension of the public water line. If that would be, an opportunity to
It's public water,
If
it's
it's a
Newport
public
water.
water main, they would be able to, if it's a public water main, they would be able to tie in, sure.
I mean, sounds like that's a kind of an ongoing problem in that area.
It's a problem on every application, as you'll find out, but, I think we have to deal with this application, and if the water line is extended, the opportunity is there for others. Mrs. Santos.
Thank you very much for listening to me again. A question. The board is recommending that this applicant tie into the Newport water. Now, is that going to be that they're going to be digging up the new road that we waited so long to have put down? Or what is it going to be? Does anybody know? Can anybody answer that?
I don't know what's involved at this point, but
I can address that. In all likelihood, that would involve digging up the road. The city requires the water line to go in the road, unfortunately not in the shoulder, and therefore, under the new town ordinance, the road would be required.
that's the city of Newport, right, who
Well,
requires it?
The city requires where the water line goes, and that's in the road bed itself. But the town has passed an ordinance that says you've got to repave the road shoulder to shoulder, and not just patch where you put the water line So it would require the repavement of Morrison to the current standards.
Is a bond required for that, Mr.?
Yeah, I think a bond would be required as part of the planning board regulations for any public improvements.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Yes.
My name's Arlene Call, 27 Willow Avenue, Middletown. I'm here on behalf of my sister Georgiana Rigo. She asked me to come and look at the plan, and I visited the planning board office, I think on Monday. I have questions on it. When I looked at the plan, and I don't know what level this plan is at. What level are you at right
It's
now?
the master plan, the very first
It
stage.
is your master plan.
It's the
Okay.
very first stage,
Mhm.
very first stage, the beginning.
Okay. I didn't see any elevations. I guess that's not
No, that's not-
required at this stage.
No.
However, my concern being, why I can't imagine the planning board would allow a subdivision of this nature when it fronts on 3 streets, and you would allow them to put a 12-foot unpaved way, graveled way, I'm assuming it would be. Now, I'm not saying I blame the applicant for trying that. I'm just saying he's maximizing every space that he possibly can when it's not necessary. You have 3 frontages there. And I just felt that I couldn't believe that in a development of this size, that would be permitted in an area that has nothing like this allowed. This subdivision across the street, I don't know what size those lots are on Island Drive. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that they don't, there's nothing permitted like that. And if it were to be, and I think I should probably wait for the next level, because I'd like to see what's going to happen there. That lot on the corner of Morrison as it bends, it looks like it meets the square footage. However, I am not sure it can meet the setbacks. I can't see it from here, and I don't have it in front of me. But I question that it can meet all the setbacks that are required. And I just ask that you take a real close look at this type of subdivision. I wouldn't like to see what's happened out on Center Avenue in that area happen to this area out here. It's country, and it should remain country as long as we can possibly do it. Not saying that there shouldn't be a subdivision. I believe if you have land, you should be permitted to subdivide it. However, you shouldn't be allowed to maximize every inch of space when you have frontages on 3 public right-of-ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Any other comments from the board members? May I have a motion for favorable recommendations subject to additional conditions?
This would be a motion to approve the plan at master plan level, subject to the conditions that we've talked about, the 6 conditions plus the 7th condition regarding the evaluation of extension of the public water main. There are 2 requested waivers.
Plus the fence on the northern boundary.
Okay, that would be an 8th condition, to install a fence along the northern boundary.
You're going to
I'm sorry?
You're going to leave the defeasible easement open-ended? Is it your recommendation to leave it open-ended, or should we put 30 in there or 50?
I don't think, well, you don't need to make that decision tonight. If you
Okay.
want to have some more discussion and thought
I'm
about
okay
that.
with it as is, but if
Yeah.
you think it's best, then I would put it in, but I'm good with it.
I don't think
I'm okay to leave it the way it is for
Yeah.
now.
That's fine.
So
BJ?
there's,
Yeah, I'd like to wait to see what is said about bringing the water in before we make a commitment
Well,
for the mess.
Can't do that.
the condition is just to have them give serious consideration to it.
Right.
Joe, you had a comment? You all set? Any other comment? Any other discussion?
So I'll make the motion.
so there, again, there are the 8 conditions. They're requesting 2 waivers regarding the proposed road right-of-way and the construction of the proposed road, waiving that. And then, of course, the 5 required findings.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, I support the application. I believe the applicant has met the burden of requirements as laid out in our rules and regs, planning board rules and regulations. They virtually meet all of the regulations at this point to get a master plan approval. So we don't have much discretion here. I think they've got their work cut out for them relative to the water, the drainage. I support the conventional plan as laid out. I think they put it there, but they've certainly, we've heard from the abutters. I think we know that there are some concerns out there, and I think we have to give them the opportunity, I know we have to give them the opportunity to do the engineering to the level of bringing it in compliance with the additional regulations. But at this point, they meet those requirements, and I think we're obligated to approve this application.
And you just, I guess, jogged my memory. So you are being asked to approve the conventional plan versus the conservation plan, and you would be required to make a finding as to why you are approving the conventional plan. The applicant has suggested that finding number 1, which is on the first sheet of the memo, is a good rationale for the board to consider in that respect. So if you would amend your motion
Yes.
to also include that finding.
So moved, yes, I'd amend my motion that way.
Is that agreeable to whoever seconded the motion?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
The next item is item 5B, application of JOJF LLC preliminary plan approval for a 2-lot minor subdivision of land located at 527 Aquidneck Avenue, plat 114, lot 242. Mr. Martin.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, David Martland on behalf of JOJF LLC. Again, with me tonight, I've got Mr. LaRusso, who's a member of JOJF LLC. As well as Mr. Rosen, who is with Principe Engineering. The proposal before the board tonight is, do you want me to wait for a moment while the room clears?
Hold on. Could they take the discussion outside the chambers, please? Could you please take the discussion outside the chambers, please? Could you please take the discussion outside? Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. The application before the board this evening is for a 2-lot subdivision on property located at 525 Aquidneck Avenue. Currently, that property has a single-family house on it. The lot itself is 1.22 acres, and this is located in an R20 district. So we've got plenty of land area, but there's insufficient frontage for a second lot. So we're here tonight asking for a conditional preliminary approval, as we meet, I think, all other requirements of the planning regulations and zoning ordinance. And that conditional preliminary approval would allow the applicant to then file the appropriate application for variance for frontage with the zoning board. And at which point, if we were able to secure that, we would come back to this board for a final approval. There is an existing driveway on Aquidneck Avenue, and as the board members that were in attendance at the site visit, there was some discussion as to how the second lot would be accessed. There were some revised plans that were submitted I don't know, maybe 10 days ago or so, which shows that what's going to be proposed is that one curb cut will be utilized for both lots. So both lots would access from that one single curb cut, so we didn't have multiple curb cuts onto Aquidneck Avenue. Aside from that, the utilities servicing the lot in the rear would probably come through that portion of the lot fronting on Aquidneck Avenue. I think, aside from the need to get the variance, this meets all the applicable standards for a subdivision. There's plenty of land area, meets the density. It is consistent, with the R20 zoning, consistent with the future land use plan, and I think we would be hard pressed to say that there would be any negative environmental impacts proposed from this type of development. With that, I would like to call Mr. Rosen up to walk through, from his standpoint, the existing conditions and the proposed conditions, and how this preliminary plan is dealing with any of the stormwater issues relative to this development. Mr. Rosen?
Deja vu.
Can you need me to restate my name?
Yes, please.
Okay. Josh Rosen, Rhode Island Registered Professional Engineer with Principi Engineering, office at 27 Saconnet Ridge Drive in Tiverton. If it's helpful, I don't know if it is, I have a modified plan that I could put on the easel. I'm not sure if you folks have that in your packet.
The one showing the shared
The
driveway?
shared driveway?
We do.
Beautiful,
I think we
okay.
have it.
So I'll just touch on a couple of highlights here. I think it's been summarized quite well so far. With the fact that this is at a preliminary stage, in order to support the fact that the second building lot is shown, would be able to support the new dwelling construction, driveway, and other infrastructure. We obviously put some detail into this plan. And as you'll see, a couple points. One, the shared driveway is intended to be of pervious nature. It's a crushed stone driveway that'll be used to accommodate access and egress through it for both of the house lots, the existing and the proposed. The additional item that we investigated here was, again, some drainage for the roof runoff from the anticipated dwelling. The site right now drains to the west to Aquidneck Avenue. There's a big watershed behind it that does the same, comes across the site from east to west, and comes through the other house lots from east to west. There appears to be adequate drainage in Aquidneck Avenue. However, we've done a bioretention design for the new property, which would accommodate some of the overland flow that comes through the property already, as well as take and disconnect the entire roof runoff from that watershed. So that area is just to the west of the proposed house. You'll see that contour grading, it's called out as such on the plan, proposed bioretention area. And that area will function again for treatment and water runoff control from the increase in impervious of the roof. The rest of the design obviously is contingent upon the pervious nature of that driveway, where we will not be adding to the impervious surface in the watershed. Other than that, the sewer service connection that's going to come from Aquidneck Avenue up through the frontage of the new property, and the site here, since there's no water in Aquidneck Avenue, will have a proposed well. But one additional single-family residence, land area, well in excess of the zoning. Just as legal counsel mentioned, it's a frontage issue in this area for the second lot. Folks have any questions on those particulars?
Questions?
I do.
BJ?
Yes, I noticed that there were 2 or 3 old trees there. Are they going to be taken down and replaced, or just taken down? as you go in the driveway?
Yeah, Mr. Rosen was not at that site visit, but Mr. Principe was there. The proposal is to try to there's one that is in fairly bad shape, and that'll probably be removed. The other ones will be maintained. So, if that answers the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to go?
No, go ahead. No, just go ahead.
Oh, sure, thank you. So, I was at the TRC, Josh, and I know Dave was there. There was some discussion on the shared driveway relative to no need for a PAP because it's using an existing curb cut. Was there some discussion to go to DOT and talk about the additional curb cut at TRC?
If there was an additional curb cut, you certainly need a PAP for that. This very well may need, I don't know if it's going to require a PAP for the additional residents, if it's utilizing the joint, driveway.
So you don't know, does that mean that you have to make an inquiry to them, a phone call?
Yes.
Josh?
Yeah, in my experience with these types of projects, it's not an issue for us to make a correspondence, send a correspondence to DOT and get confirmation in writing either way. And if we would need an amendment to the original PAP, we could file that. But more than likely, we'll get a letter from them indicating that based on the plan that's shown that they wouldn't need an actual new physical alteration permit. We have no problem doing that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happen.
If I could just jump in for a moment. In connection with a minor subdivision, and that's, 5 or fewer lots.
Sure.
The state permits are not required as part of the filing requirement to have a certified application. And so we didn't go down that road relative at this level.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
So we were certainly, it's probably required at the next level, but that's why that issue hasn't been really
Yeah, it came
worked
up,
out.
and I mean, I bring it up only because the discussion I recall is that potentially the DOT may be interested in moving the curb cut further away from an intersection from Morrison. Not that it would make much of a difference, I'm not the engineer that would make that determination, but regardless of all that, it seems to be a pretty big impact on Lot A versus Lot B. I know that it's under the same ownership, and I know that ultimately one gets sold, but frankly, just cutting a swath of land right out of Lot A, and that just doesn't create a good, potentially in the future going forward. The house in the back is a pretty large house, and if they have guests and entertain, I anticipate, vehicles being parked, frankly, all the way down that driveway, which creates just more disruption to the whomever is living in Lot A, House A. But, it seems to be a pretty big disruption. I would frankly prefer to see the curb cut be moved and the access to both come from a newly constructed driveway cutting across the existing Lot A. That's how I would prefer it, but if you're going to check with DOT, I would defer to what they say. I think it's a better condition. I just think that's a big swath to cut through an existing property to allow people to access. Just my personal opinion.
Something to consider. Any other comments? With respect to the comment that BJ made, showing this shared driveway the way you show it on the drawing, it's not clear to me how the trees are going to be affected. Okay, I would much prefer to see something that's more definitive. But quite frankly, I like the suggestion that Mr. Nash made, which even makes the tree issue easier. So I think you should consider those changes. Ron, what is the next step in this process?
If preliminary approval is granted by the board tonight, the next step is that the applicant would go to the zoning board of review seeking the variance for frontage that they need. That would be a public hearing before the zoning board of review. If they're successful in receiving that variance, they come back to the planning board for final plan approval.
Final plan approval. So if we would like to have them consider relocation of the curb cut, that should be done now rather than before, it should be done before
You
they
can
go.
make it as a condition of the preliminary approval.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think at the very least, we need to do that. They're going to go to DOT and ask for consideration, and DOT is going to tell them yes or no. And as Josh said, the engineer said they'll likely approve it that way. But if they would consider it, that would be even better for us at this point, but we'll go there.
Yeah, Mr. LaRusso is certainly willing to look at, review, and move the driveway south and have a combined relocated driveway that would be, if I could just approach, so I can point out. So the existing driveway, do you have, there's no plan for that? Okay.
Well, we have these drawings that show.
I'm going to suggest the existing driveway is on the other side of this pole. Is that correct?
That's about right.
Right? And what we would consider is moving the driveway in a southerly direction so that it was a shared access located along the proposed property line.
Much better,
Better.
much better.
I like that better, but would you consider continuing the application until then, or I would prefer to do it
Well,
that way?
Ron suggested we make it a condition.
If-
We'll make it a condition.
Well, I think we could continue the application so we have the plan to the August 26th meeting.
Okay, all right. So if you can show us a drawing and how you've laid it out.
That's correct.
Could you also indicate on there where the trees are?
And
so
we
people can see
will
it?
do that.
Yeah.
Since we're considering conditional approval anyway, we could add that to the conditional approval, that other condition be met in accordance with relief to the zoning.
Well, he just said he's willing to continue this to the next meeting.
Well, I'm just
Well, he
thinking,
can show us
yeah,
drawings.
yeah, we're gonna do both things at the next,
Yeah.
if you wanna continue.
Both
Yeah.
items, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need anything on landscaping?
Okay, speaking to the mic.
Sorry, do we need anything on landscaping for this project or not? Just,
There's no landscaping plan required for this type of project.
all right, because it's a very nice lot. It really is.
Yeah, it is. Yes,
Any
it is.
other comments? Can I have a motion to continue this item to the,
I think there might be some audience members, if I could just.
well, there's no requirement for this, but I'm willing to hear it. So if anyone from the public would like to say something.
Hi, my name's Mike Santos. I bought the property on the east side. Why was I not notified of this at all? I have no notification of this planning board meeting until somebody called up and mentioned if I had known about it.
They're, under the regulations and the
It's not
state,
required?
under the state statute, a butter notification for a minor subdivision is not required.
At what level does it become required?
If it's a major subdivision or if a new road is being proposed as part of a minor subdivision, notification is required. You will get notice of the zoning board hearing when the next step is, this isn't going to be approved
Right,
tonight. They're going
right.
to
It
come
goes
back
to
next
zoning
month.
board for the
But
variance for the.
once they go to the zoning board
second
for the
piece of
variance,
property.
you'll get that notice.
Fine, and also, this is, if my understanding is correct, this is not a current drawing you have up there. You've made revisions to the driveway subsequent to this being submitted?
Yes.
Can I have a copy of that drawing, please?
Certainly.
That'd be great.
Here, you can have this.
Perfect. And just be aware that they're also considering further modifications for the next month. All right.
I have no problem with this at all. This is fine. I would prefer to have a privacy buffer along my property line, if that's possible. It can be trees. You guys seem to like trees. I
guys
like
work it
trees.
out.
Let's put a row of arborvitae's there and something else, mix it up a little
Mr.
bit.
Matlin?
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfectly reasonable request. We will put that into a revised plan. And, I'd like to share that with you before the
Absolutely.
meeting. Would you want me to just mail that to your house, or,
Email's fine.
and what's that?
Hemi,
What is it?
HEMI 422 @gmail.com. Mike Santos. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
If I can make a comment?
So the plans will also show the barrier that you're going to,
Yeah, we will submit a proposed landscape plan for that barrier.
okay, very good. Art?
Well, I've gone on record with support from the planning board that we notify abutters whether it's a minor or major subdivision. And I don't know if we have an opinion from the solicitor, because, Mr. Santos, if I lived where you did, I would want to have a surprise, whether it's minor or major. I think any abutter should be entitled to know when something's happening that might impact his property, so.
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, I'm not upset by this.
Yeah, I get it, but still, right? Didn't we talk about that?
The solicitor was asked to address that and to look into whether the town has the ability to require further notifications beyond what the statute calls for. So maybe Mr. Bovin can ask Peter to look into that.
Okay.
Or I can look into it as well, yeah.
You can ask him yet again. We've been after him to do this for quite a while now.
All right.
It would be good to get an opinion from him. Any other comments? Any other people in the public who would like to offer a comment?
Teresa?
We have a motion to continue this to the August 26th meeting.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Needed to do that, but just keep that.
Next item on the agenda are our updates. Item 6A is the status report on planning board items. Does anyone have any comments on these? I have just one comment. In my discussion with Ron this afternoon, we noted that several of these are being held back until there's room on the agenda. We would have had room on the agenda had we known that certain things would be continued. So I've asked him to put them on the agenda, and we can just continue them if we have to. We
So
have
for
a
that
busy
August
agenda.
26th meeting, the agenda is going to look very daunting. However,
Send out the food.
you'll get to what you get, what you get to, and then continue the rest.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it's tough to map that out. It's
Yeah.
tough.
That's the only comment I have. Anyone else have comments on the project report? I assume nothing new with BRAC? No. Committee reports, rural village, Art?
Well, I had a discussion with the planner about this. We are having difficulty getting comments from both owners. And I think the other thing it's thrown a wrench into this is the Chris Bichot's request for a liquor license was denied. And so I think it's a little more complicated, but I asked Ron for the phone numbers. I will personally call both of them and try to light a little fire under
Yeah,
it so we
good.
can get going.
Good, very good.
Yep.
Use table addressing mixed use. Bill?
So, yeah, we have a subcommittee meeting scheduled for, what, August 2nd?
Yes.
Ron? Thank you. Nothing else to report on that.
Okay, tree commission, BJ?
Yes, it's very interesting because this was, I brought up the issue of the developers not maintaining approved landscaping for the developments that have been brought up in the past. And the tree commission was very positive about the fact that the proposal that they perhaps take an active choice of each or any development in the, perhaps even posting a bond or having the developer post a bond. But they were very interested in having Alan Kirby, and he agreed that he would be very interested in looking after some of these developments for, let's say, a year, and perhaps payment could be made with the developer, maybe checking with Alan Kirby as to how often he felt he would need to take a look at the plantings and what was happening. But they were very positive about it. Matter of fact, they were pleased.
Good, very good. Ron, are you drafting something on that?
I'm going to be working with the solicitor on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Open space and fields, Mike?
I was notified that the next, they were planning on a meeting on the 17th, but then they came up, they said that they had previously planned not to have any meetings during the summertime, so it looks like there won't be a meeting, and it's probably going to be put off until September.
You did get my email, right?
What's that?
You did get my email
On,
just putting you in touch with
with the,
Nick and
yes, thank you.
Let's make sure you got
Yeah,
it.
I'm on the list now, I'll get emails
Good.
from them.
Okay. Conservation Commission, Joe?
Yeah, hi, Mr. Chairman. I've been in touch with, is it Gary Paquette? And the meeting we were having on July 8th was canceled, postponed this past Monday. There is a pending item that's coming before the Conservation Commission about a new residential application in a wetland protection area that I've been provided the information on and reviewing, and, you know, just waiting for Gary to get the next
Okay.
follow-up schedule.
I just want to make sure you're aware that you are a voting member of that commission. Because there was uncertainty a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Quidneck Island Planning Commission, Art.
The work continues on an update process to get the West Side Master Plan brought up to 2019. The second thing, the Quidneck Island Planning Commission is a strong sponsor of an outfit called Island Waters, and they actually have 3 physical projects they're undertaking, which will occur in both Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport. For example, they're going to come in and upgrade the retention ponds in where I live. And they do something similar in Portsmouth, and they've got a project in Newport also. So the interesting thing yesterday, I pick up the New York Times, and what do I see in their scientific section? There's an article there about sea rise on the point. And I think we're going to mobilize some kind of a sea rise since we live on an island, but I think the state will be paying attention to it. But I think it's another good project for Quidneck Island Planning Commission.
Very good, thank you. And I understand that polling is taking place for airport zoning and the marijuana. Well, the marijuana, the meeting has been set.
Yep,
Yes.
so we've got marijuana subcommittee set for August 2nd at 1 p.m. And as Bill mentioned, the use table subcommittee is that same afternoon, right after the marijuana subcommittee, so at 2:30 that same afternoon on the 2nd. I did send out a poll for airport zoning, and Joe and BJ responded. I haven't heard from Mike yet, but the date it looks like it might work, if it works for Mike, is July 26th at 1 p.m. So that's the date, July 26th,
Okay,
1
very
p.m.
good. Very good, very good. Upcoming meetings, in addition to those we just mentioned for subcommittees, we have a public workshop on the hazard mitigation plan, a hard copy of which you received this evening from Ron, on July 24th at 6 p.m. And we have a public workshop on the Atlantic Beach Zoning Overlay District on July 31st at 6 p.m. And then our regular meeting on August 26th.
So, just,
Any other business for the meet? for
I
the
just
board?
make a note that the 31st, I am likely not going to be here for the Atlantic Beach District. I just, something came up with work for me. I'm gonna see if I can get out of it, but it's not likely that I'll be here. I'll do the best I can.
Bill was the chair of the use committee aspect of that work, so if he cannot make it, make sure the work you did was covered.
Yes.
I mean, what's the format of that? It's,
It's going to be a brief presentation of the work of the two subcommittees, the use table and the design subcommittees presenting. It's really just rough drafts at this point. The real purpose of the meeting is to accept public input. So we'll give a brief presentation, the board can ask questions and have whatever discussion you wish to have. But the bulk of the meeting should be opening it up to the floor, getting as much input as we can from the public to help refine those drafts.
I know a postcard notice went out.
Yes.
I
You get
received one.
yours?
I received one, and, yeah, in my neighborhood did. Any activity in the office?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet? I wouldn't anticipate there being a lot yet, but there probably will be as we get close.
I think there'll be a good crowd at the meeting.
Likely, yes.
I suspect so. A very interested big crowd. We have a meeting to adjourn.
Motion, so moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. At the marijuana meeting, marijuana meeting, do we-
So you can't.
You bring the, lights.